As network business and digital services come together and telcos expand revenue opportunities, that through IoT adoption, what challenges exist not only in IoT adoption, but also to develop, deploy, and monetize new connected services. Here to give us an overview of these adoption and revenue concerns for the telco community are Amit Tiwari, he's with Affirm Networks. Also have Brent Hodges, he's with Dell EMC. Next to Brent is Godfrey Chua, he's with Makina Research. And on the end is Sami Yamani with Viavi Solutions. And panels, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Now, of course, all four of you participated in TIA's CTO Council meeting right here in Austin, Texas. I want to thank all four of you for doing that. Particularly for Brent, Dell EMC was a sponsor for TIA's CTO Council meeting and also invited us for Dell World, which will be commencing tomorrow and through almost through the end of the week. So, Brent, thank you for that.
Glad to have you.
Well, today we want to talk about the challenges in the IoT space. That was primarily the discussion, again, at TIA's CTO Council meeting. Brent, I want to start with you, talking about a comment that was made during the meeting about IoT challenges really being a political issue and not so much a technology issue. Now, of course, that's not an absolute statement, but there's certainly an impact on the political side. Is that not right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we had a lively discussion about that. I'm sure my colleagues will chime in as we did during the session. I think from my perspective or perspective at Dell, we actually see that the challenge still lies more in the assembly of the ingredients to build the IoT solution. So really, we like to drill down at use case levels and really use that to help us focus our solutions as we talk to our partners and our customers. That said, we do recognize that, from a government policy standpoint, the privacy concerns for the Internet of Things it's still in its infancy. And so that topic is one that we will continue to watch and monitor and work alongside our colleagues in the industry to help facilitate what we see will be a lively debate for many years to come.
If I can just add a quick point to that, because I think I agree, is that from a technological standpoint, there's so many technologies out there actually available to serve the vision of IoT and make it a reality. There is a little bit of a challenge that maybe there's a little too much, that there's a challenge for solution providers and customers to figure out, well, which of these technologies should I actually use? And I think there's a tremendous amount of need from the ecosystem out there to sort of provide that guidance in terms of if you're looking for a solution, trying to solve a business problem, what are the best technology pieces to help you get there and really create an optimal solution for your business problem. But the other issue that we contend with in IoT, so I sort of partially agree with the statement there, right, is that IoT is comprised of many, many different markets. And the reality is in each of the use cases that you folks may be exploring, each of the applications and vertical segments that we may be looking at, they're governed by different policy regulations and rules and industry regimes that vary from country to country as well. And to navigate through that and to develop solutions at a high level can be tough once you get into those individual use cases and countries. And that is quite a friction point within IoT right now.
Actually, I would add to another aspect of the politics of the ecosystem for IoT. And one of the things you observe with this is every solution, by its very diversity and all the aspects that need to be coming together to actually pull together the entire solution to be consumable, requires multiple players to play together. And this, for the first time, is actually driving that aspect of it. And folks are still coming to terms with the fact that what used to be a clear competition in the past now actually requires cooperation. Yeah. And the point you made about the different verticals and such, there might be verticals where they actually are directly competing. And there are other verticals where they actually have to coexist, not only coexist, make the other guy successful to get the entire solution to become consumable. That's another politics of the ecosystem that has to be solved. And for good or for bad, IoT is one of those early drivers, and as you know, as first time that it's coming together, it has its challenges that are being solved as well.
But I would argue that the political part of it shouldn't actually, held it back. In fact, the argument is IoT is out there, the cat is out of the box, right? And if we don't manage it right now, delaying it is not going to solve the problem. So I think policies have to actually be accelerated to actually match the what we are seeing in the industry. And waiting is not going to help the solution at all.
Amit, Godfrey, again, during the meeting, Godfrey gave a presentation, and by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, but it stated that 38% of enterprise businesses or companies are actively using IoT. Would you would you say that that number should be higher? And if not, what are the general challenges that are pushing back on that adoption?
Absolutely, and that was a great point. So if you think about, as companies are, getting to do more and more, right? One thing we observe very clearly, it's no longer a question so much of whether we do this or not, right? Most people are beyond the, that acceptance phase, right? I think that's the positive, right? Now the thing is, the tech companies were always adapting, embracing, doing different things for efficiency's sake or other reasons. There's a whole set of industries out there who are actually now operationalizing to embrace technology in their core business. It's not about the IT that was the back-end systems. Now it's actually the core business. The products they make are connected. The supply chain that feeds the assembly lines are connected, right? So now they're actually, technology is becoming core to that business. And that, in a lot of cases, actually becomes where they're learning. They're going up the curve, right? So the thing that would make this move faster would be very quick adaptation of technology to their core business. Who are the people who actually are supposed to actually help them go through that, right? You see large systems integrators, you see mobile operators, and these are folks who are, here's the very interesting part, they are actually doing the same themselves because they are a large enterprise. They're doing the same thing where they're making this technology core to their business, and they're actually going out there and consulting, designing, verifying, testing, deploying that technology for their consumer base, right? So it is a case of skill set, the number of people who are ramped up on this, organizationally, how these enterprises adapt to this technology embrace. And I think this is the reason which is holding up the desire to go very fast.
I will add one other thing, and specifically on the service provider side. I think the history of how smartphone came in, and I remember we were one of the first to look at performance of these new iPhones and Android devices, and the surprise of how much expanded data that came in, a lot of signaling that's happening. So there is a concern right now. Do we really understand the extent of how these devices, how these IoT devices can impact the current customer experience? And that's holding them back because there is no model to look at to verify that.
Absolutely.
I think there's another aspect there as well that goes to another point. I believe Godfrey, actually you made it during the meeting, which had to do with I think you referred to them as subnets, and I think I'm also familiar with islands of automation, and so the idea of I think as you were describing that we have new technology being applied to processes. We also have processes that have data that we're now trying to apply to the business. And I think this brings into contention the tension between IT and OT, the operational technology, the factory floor, the supply chain. They've been driven by very different metrics. And now as you start to think about the Internet of Things more holistically, you're bringing in kind of more of an enterprise and IT approach. And to your point about how does this affect the users, I think it's kind of early to tell, to be honest. And I think this is the tension that we see from a Dell standpoint as we have a more traditional approach from an IT standpoint. But what we're seeing is that it's this convergence of IT and OT and really helping to bring together two sides, maybe of the same company, that haven't spent a lot of time talking to each other in order to help them solve a business problem that they holistically want to do to move their business forward to achieve digital transformation.
And actually, I want to add a few more thoughts too, because I think your point about IT and OT and sort of that almost a collision between the two organizations and the need for collaboration going forward, I think that's very fundamental to the challenge of pushing IoT forward. But I'd actually take that even further and say that if you look at what IoT can deliver to an organization or to any business out there, start thinking about the functional groups within an organization. And what I mean by that is look at the marketing organization, finance, sales, product management, and you start thinking about what IoT can deliver specifically to each of those functional groups, there's actually a significant amount of value. And what we found in our research is that the constituencies that are driving IoT within an organization may not necessarily be IT or OT. What it is a visionary within the organization that may come from product management, could be finance, or it could be at the C-level. And I think that's part of the challenge is that right now, IoT and the drive for IoT is coming from many different places. Traditionally, IT and OT have kind of held it, or different pieces of it, but now we're also seeing it go beyond. And I think that's creating a lot of organizational rethink in terms of, well, maybe we need to step back and say, well, who should drive this? And I think that's what we'll see continue to evolve over the next 12 to 24 months to accelerate IoT adoption and push it beyond the 38% is organizations also kind of figure out what is the best way to move forward with a cohesive IoT plan rather than an IoT plan that is just happening in silos and is disjointed within the enterprise.
Godfrey, of course, security is a major challenge in the IoT space. Some say that telcos may not be giving enough attention to security concerns. Some even say that telcos have their head in the sand because they know that security is not 100% foolproof and they'd rather just skirt the issue. First of all, how can telcos protect themselves from this sort of exposure? And secondly, I just want you to notice that I asked the analyst this question, not the rest of you guys. You can get in the least trouble.
Well, and to counter that a little bit, and maybe to clarify that statement a little bit, is that I think that telcos are actually in an opportune position to address the security issue within IoT, right? And here's why I think that that is an opportune position. And I would actually argue that a good number of them are, I think, are starting to address it and actually have a very interesting value proposition around it, see it as a very interesting way to change the typical telco conversation. So the telco leaders that we see in this space are actually bringing security propositions to their IoT customers. And it's a step change. You know, we think of the telco as the telco comes to you and says, monthly minutes of use or monthly gigabits of package, and that's the kind of talk that they know to speak, or megabytes of bandwidth or gigabytes of bandwidth. But we're actually seeing telcos talk it's a security wrap. They're actually talking network analytics and utilizing that for threat and malware and anomaly detection using the network. So here's the challenge, the fundamental challenge in security and IoT, at least as we see it, which is an IoT solution is comprised of many different pieces and components. And each and every one of those components, the device, the application, the network layer, the storage, all those various pieces need to be secured effectively. And at the end of the day, you're only as strong as your weakest link within each of those pieces. So, you know, if you've secured everything, but the application developer forgot one simple rule in maybe authenticating who's trying to talk to the application, then you lost it, you know, then you have a point of entry. So the threat vectors really amplify in IoT. Now for the telco, it's very interesting because at one layer, you need to secure each and every piece within an IoT solution. But the telco, because they run the network within which these IoT solutions run, they have the opportunity to create a wrap or a security wrap around these IoT solutions. And we do actually see some of them starting to use that capability in terms of networking analytics as a way to actually introduce security services into the equation.
You know, I'd actually add to that. You know, we see this, you know, living in the mobile space entirely. You know, you see telcos actually leveraging this as a unique opportunity. And what you see is, you know, they're actually putting in paradigms for mobile-to-mobile, you know, mobile-to-mobile firewalls, right? See, here's a very interesting part. When you're going over the top, you know, although it's a low barrier to entry, right? But, you know, basically, the level of control and security that you can put in place is vastly different than we are actually running a secure telco network, right? Yeah. All the things Godfrey said are applicable. But the telcos have this unique position where they actually have a network that is secured at a certain level, and they actually have the ability to secure what is in that network, right? They control it. They control it. There's a very, it's a very distinct advantage that the telcos have. And I'll just highlight this point, right? That I think they're very clearly beginning to see this, right? And as an opportunity, and mobile security, mobile-to-mobile security, running applications in protected, you know, in a protected space and a protected, like you term it as a wrapper, I think is a key advantage that the telcos have, and they're actually moving on it.
Although I would argue that yes, the telco have the history of, you know, securing the network, but the impact of security hacks at the network level is a little bit different when it's going to come to IoT. I mean, you're talking about connected car where people are driving, right? So it has a different level of magnitude that I think a lot of people are worried about right now. So that's one of the area of security that a lot of people are concerned, because it's not just impacting the network and maybe cybersecurity, but it may actually have more liability issue as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And actually, just I mean, that's a really good point. And you think about it, I would be more likely to be served on critical applications through somebody that I actually pay a monthly bill to and I know is liable and has been around for 100 years, than somebody who showed up 3 months ago and now they have a very cool dating app, right? I'd much rather go with somebody who's got a secure, serious business, right? Who actually I pay for, right? So again, I think telcos have an opportunity and they can take this forward.
Yeah, I think you're right. The position that they're in, if you will, the connectivity fabric that's so important to IoT. You're right. Telcos have a trusted relationship history, and an opportunity. And I think that's kind of your point.
Yes.
If they choose to seize it, there's an opportunity.
Absolutely.
Now, then, does that mean that they become more liable? Perhaps.
That's your point. Yeah.
But at the same time, it does present, an opportunity and a challenge.
Absolutely.
And so I think as you're pointing out, Godfrey, we're seeing some maybe thought leaders in the space starting to venture out and starting to understand: are there real opportunities for business here as a telco service provider to offer those kinds of services, and can they be paid for? At the end of the day, is it really worth that risk that I might take on? Maybe it is if I'm able to serve a large swath of enterprise customers with new services.
Yeah. Well, and just to be fair too, because I think to be fair to the telcos, both on the good and the bad side, right? Because I think at one level, the telcos don't get enough credit in terms of their capabilities in IoT. But on the other hand, not all telcos have really progressed in terms of understanding these issues and paying attention to these issues, specifically in security, right? I mean, it is only a handful of telcos that we see that are really pioneering and having that sensitivity to these security issues. But as has been stated, I think the ramifications for breaches, security breaches or hacks in IoT can be much more significant. So you also want the organization behind it. To sort of have that the capabilities and sort of that history and then the strength of an overall organization to also stand behind these things.
So in this discussion, you guys mentioned the over-the-top players and their role in the IoT space and how that ties back really to the telco community. Sami, you said in the CTO Council meeting that the telco community is investing a lot of money, a lot of investment in the infrastructure for the IoT space, and really the OTTs will come in and really benefit from that. That's happened in the past. Is it a matter of time? Is it inevitable that the OTTs will disrupt this space?
Well, I mean, it's a very good point to understand. What happened initially was not predicted, right? You invest a lot of investment in messaging technology and video technology, and suddenly the over-the-top, which is lower quality kind of application, taking the market, and people are accepting it because it gives them an alternative they didn't see before. I believe IoT is even more dangerous because you're gonna build an infrastructure that is gonna be expensive and extendable and scalable. And if we don't think from now about how to manage the over the top and how to integrate it as part of the business model, I think it's a matter of time they will overrun again the same infrastructure by over the top application that you have no control over, and you lose the investment that you build in this infrastructure.
Maybe a slightly different point of view on that. Not so much a completely alternative point of view, but maybe sort of a hybrid point of view, because I actually think that at some level, the telcos have already learned their lesson from over the top, right? And the challenges, and we certainly hope. But we are seeing that. We're actually seeing telco organizations create over the top organizations within their entities. But having said that, the one difference that I will say with IoT versus the world of the internet as we've known it and smartphones and things like that is that IoT is about a multitude of many different markets, right? And I think the real challenge for the telcos is to figure out what areas within IoT to focus specifically. Because the reality is all of IoT is not all applicable or relevant to the telco. So it's very important for them in a world of finite resources to focus on key verticals, use cases, and applications that really play to their strength of the network knowledge, owning the network, and those types of attributes. And to be honest enough with themselves to actually seed portions of the IoT market and say, we're not strongest there, let's give it to the OTT players, solution providers. Of course, there will be areas where they will battle with OTTs.
And I'm not saying we should stop OTT. I think it should be part of the business model. Yes. I mean, I will argue that iOS and Android actually did build an infrastructure for anybody to innovate and use the infrastructure. So my point, telco has to learn from the mistake and say, I now actually will incorporate over the top in my business mode, so I'm not going to be surprised anymore by what they do.
Exactly. Incorporate over the top and actually open up my network, my capabilities to the ecosystem, invite development, invite collaboration in a way that we've never seen telcos do before.
See, we have an interesting kind of perspective on the telco and the mobility aspect of this. See, telcos have some inherent advantages because of the business that they're in, right? Because of the experience that they have adapted over a vast number of years. Think about native mobile verticals, right? Verticals that require native mobility, fleet management, a whole set of, autonomous driving, augmented reality while you're in motion, right? Those kinds of things. The telcos know how things, when they move, how to make sure there is seamless connections, how to make sure there's high quality of service when things are in motion, right? These are things where there's a native value add that telcos can provide because they know the network, they know what mobility is about, right? Then there is the other aspect to this, back to both of your points, which is it's almost, you'd say, smarter for telcos to actually seed that because it's about connectivity. Some are pure connectivity plays in IoT, and perhaps OTT is the right model for them because that's what a lot of the OTT players kind of do. But then there is high value, high touch applications and verticals that require mobility management, so to say, and then quality management over mobility management. Telcos have a native, natural advantage there, and I think if they can focus on that, they should be able to provide a better app experience.
Yeah, and I think we talked about that a little bit during the council where, you look at the connected car as the example that I think brings it home in spades, where you have carriers really around the world embracing this as one of the lead use cases. And we did have some discussion whether that really qualifies as the Internet of Things, but if you just take that at face value and say, as a mobile asset, as an asset that needs ubiquity of connection and in some areas relatively high bandwidth, you have a very natural fit there for the telcos to provide a service, which they actually have been doing for quite some time. Now the question becomes, as we expand IoT, you start to see things like connected fleet management, as we talk about, we did a little bit in the council about the autonomous driving and advanced infrastructure, traffic management. At some point you start to wonder if that inherent advantage goes away a little bit as you move towards the infrastructure, perhaps. Maybe it's more important for others to come along with innovative solutions, riding over the top, and that the connectivity fabric becomes the underlying, backbone, backplane that resides there. But the telcos are really focused on, maybe providing value in certain connected services, but maybe not others.
One last comment on this telco challenge, which goes back to Sami's opening comment, which is, I think then the challenge is, when a telco does embrace sort of some OTT attributes, right? Then the challenge then becomes convincing the customer that they are of that OTT mindset, meaning I'm proposing a solution to you that is in fact agnostic to the network that I own, but really is the best solution for you. Yeah. And that will be a challenge.
Godfrey, I'm going to go to you on the next question. Really from a global perspective, a number of MVNOs cropping up in the IoT space. Do you think that it's easier for telcos to concede market share rather to these MVNOs instead of building their own IoT business?
The quick answer is no. And I think telcos will want to keep the opportunity beyond connectivity and beyond sort of just wholesale connectivity to themselves, because that's what's really going to open up the doorway for them to capture a much, much larger addressable market. Now, having said that, I think IoT is broad enough that there is, well, for one thing, there's a crop of MVNOs that are emerging, but there's already a crop of MVNOs that have been around for a while. Before we even called this thing IoT, back in the days when we called this machine to machine, there were these MVNOs that really actually early on decided we're going to specialize in connectivity and providing value-added services to these things, these machines that get connected to the network that are not smartphones or tablets or laptops. And these companies have been there since the early days when there was not much attention or market hyper investment going on. And these folks have really worked hard and I think understand the industry in a way that's also very unique, which I think is also a big part of the reason that they will continue to survive and actually play an important role in the overall IoT ecosystem. So I think there's a place for everyone, but I don't think it's an easy, I'm a telco, I'll just cede to these MVNOs. some did that in the past, but even those folks are actually changing their tune now.
I think that speaks to a little bit of the conversation we had around partnerships and where IoT is really driving maybe a unique set of partnering opportunities and challenges across the spectrum, right? Because as you look at different verticals, there's different requirements and so forth. And as you point out, in some places there are what we would now call MVNOs that have focused on device connectivity for decades, literally, and have done a nice job. So do you come in and try to disrupt what's already going on, or do you find partnership opportunities? So I think it'll depend, and it'll probably make things messier for a time.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. You're gonna see it messier for a time, but I think that there are gray areas between these MVNOs, because we're assuming IoT will be like these well-defined verticals. Well, you're gonna see bleeding between these verticals, and I think this is where the telco is gonna realize that one, consolidation is gonna be required at some point, and also that they can play the intermediate role of orchestrating across these MVNOs.
One very interesting thing that we observe, see if you think about this, the whole MVNO evolution, right? There was a reason why it mushroomed, right? Because these were niche segmented markets that had a great opportunity for somebody to move fast, succeed fast, or fail fast. But the ones that survived, they succeeded fast, right? Those became successful MVNOs. The interesting thing about IoT we're observing now, again back to the telcos, having learned, right, is with virtualization in place, telcos having invested significantly in data center virtualization, NFV, they actually now are able to, as this MVNO IoT business gets rationalized and moves towards a virtualized ecosystem, telcos again have an opportunity, and we are seeing them actually in some cases, not all, in some cases seize this, because they can actually have, most of them are deploying IoT with a platform that is multi-services based, right? It gives them once again an opportunity, another shot at this business, where they can actually have either their own MVNO, which is virtualized, hence lower cost, and scalable, because now they can do multiple verticals. And MVNO, think about this, MVNO becomes a vertical, or MVNO becomes one enterprise that they're targeting for their enterprise services. So it's a very interesting dynamic that you see, right? There's a new aspect to this. This is another bite that the telcos get to take at that enterprise or MVNO business with a virtualized IoT platform capability.
I want to go down the line here to kind of wrap up the conversation, asking you really about a disruptor in the IoT space or a dominant technology in the IoT space that you can think of. And I only asked this question because there was a mention in the meeting about low-powered, wide area technologies and how that's dominating the IoT space. So would you agree with that LPWA is a dominant technology, and if not, what is?
It's a very, very pertinent question to what we talked about in the council today. So if you think about this, look at NB-IoT, right? It's something that has been driven through standards and been adapted, I would contend, at a record pace, right? And one of the drivers for that has been the competitive environment in which the telcos have been, right? So to actually make sure they can address the requirement that's being driven by the market, from all the proliferation of the low power technologies, we're talking about how will they adapt? Will they look at this as a challenge? How the telcos seize this, right? I would contend NB-IoT, the pace at which it was ratified, driven by telcos, the pace at which it's being adapted and deployed and moved, to me is a beautiful thing. It's a great sign that the telcos have learned. They have adapted, and they're actually driving this forward, right? So to answer the question back, I'd say it is a very relevant factor. NB-IoT as a response is a very effective response. It's being moved on very quickly. And if this is a sign of times to come, I think the telcos should be able to flourish and drive in this new environment.
I would actually argue that because of LPWA, actually narrowband IoT, was pushed more towards becoming more standardization and actually accelerated the standard process, right? And so this one, in fact, if you say it's dominant today, its dominance created the need for going through a standardization process and push narrowband IoT in.
Absolutely, and so exactly. I think that's a great point, right? Because think about it. LPWA being dominant and very quickly actually eating into this new huge market that we talk about, right? Drove a response which is exactly the response you want, right? And it actually talks back to the fact that they can learn new tricks, and not only that, they can be very effective, right? So you can see NB-IoT with its standardization, massive scale, low cost capability, the ability to interoperate for all telcos all of a sudden now to actually be able to participate in this, it's almost you'd say it has done exactly what you would have wanted it to do. We couldn't have ordered it better, right? And NB-IoT is driving that forward.
Absolutely, and in addition to that, I think you've also seen that several operators around the globe have actually embraced even some of the existing low power wide area networking standards and technologies to be able to deploy today and to partner, as well as at the same time working on common standards across the globe for narrowband IoT. So I think it's been interesting how quickly that has emerged and how the response from the telcos has really driven towards partnerships in an area that might be deemed very competitive to what would might be their core business, but the point is that they're out there partnering. It's challenging business models, and it's an interesting to see how quickly that area has moved.
Just one point on, and I guess, and feel free to disagree with me, because I would actually argue the term dominant, because I think LPWA has been dominant from the standpoint of mind share in the way, especially the telco world has been thinking about IoT and the relevance of IoT to them. But in terms of sheer connections, LPWA still comprises a small majority relative to the rest of cellular. So I see it as more disruptive and certainly dominant in terms of the thinking. And dominant in terms of the thinking is because that's what's really going to help the telcos expand their addressable market within IoT. And having worked in this industry and looked at this industry for several years now, one thing that solution developers have for the longest time been asking for is, the ecosystem has been there for quite a while, working hard at some of these connected solutions and things like that. And they've been looking for the kind of economics and technical performance that these various LPWA technologies deliver. And the non-standardized, unlicensed spectrum solutions that are out there, or the proprietary solutions, have been played a major role in terms of driving NB-IoT and LTE-M standardization process and accelerating that, like what you said, Amit, that it's progressed at a pace that has been, in some level, quite a surprise. And reassuring. Yeah, the industry can get together. Yeah.
It tells you, it's a proof point that we can do it, right? And they can do it, right? And it can, all the points we talked about, right?
Yes.
They can respond.
They can coalesce, respond, and agree, so that we all can move forward. Yeah.
I was just going to say, you were talking about the fast pace of this IoT space, and I thought the discussion at the CTO council meeting was moving at a very fast pace, not because you wanted it to be that way, but because there were so many topics to discuss and cover. Yeah. Hopefully next time we can host an event that allow you to cover those additional topics that we didn't get to. I want to again thank Sami, Godfrey, Brent, and Amit for being part of that meeting, also being part of this panel discussion. I thought you got some good points across. Thanks again, and Brent, once again, thanks for your sponsorship.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.